Hey, what's the most exciting day for you? Is it the day you buy or the day you sell? I started buying single family in 2005, buy, renovate, rent it out, refinance, and then repeat it. At a six cap, every additional dollar in monthly income that you add adds $200 in value.
There's a difference between a dream chaser and a dream catcher. Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Dream Catchers podcast. I'm your host, Jerome, and we hopped on over to Tennessee, ladies and gentlemen, and found Brandon Thornberry, a referral from Chad Sutton. And if you remember his episode a few weeks ago, he talked about building a $200 million portfolio, and birds of a feather flock together because Brandon is in the real estate game as well, doing some multifamily. So Brandon, welcome in, man. Thanks for coming on.
Oh, Jerome, thanks so much for having me, man. Love chatting real estate and just a pleasure to chat with you today.
Sure, man. So I always started this way, and I think this is going to be true for you. So you had an exit.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so that jumps a little way into the story, but we can just go there. I started out in single family, but later on transitioned more into multifamily and commercial properties. So my first multifamily I bought was a 32 unit and planned to hold it for decades. And about 10 months in, somebody came along and said, "Hey, we want to buy this. We've got it, 1031 exchange." They made me a really nice offer. And I said, "Hey, if you can add a little more on top, I'll take the money and run." So about just 12 months into that first complex, I decided to exit out of that. And then I did a 1031 into two more. So
You
yeah,
were
that was
hooked.
that was not what I was planning, but just decided to exit out of that. So it was interesting and learned a lot from it for sure. Yeah.
So let's go back, man, before
Mhm.
you buy the first deal, because I don't think you grew up independently wealthy. I don't think there's a trust fund. You were able to buy a 32 unit apartment complex. What'd you do to earn the original money so that you could actually make this investment?
Yeah. So I've kind of found when I've bought complexes by myself without a JV or a syndication, it usually involves a few things. So it usually involves me selling a single family house, doing a 1031 out of that, coupling that with some refinances that I'm doing, along with some cash that I've had saved up. So that usually is what it looks like, unless I'm 1030 out of another multifamily. So I started buying single family in 2005 and built up a single family portfolio, and then reached a point where I was like, this is not scalable. So I've started to sell off some of those single family and 1031 into larger deals. So that's how I managed to buy my first 32 unit. And luckily that was seller financed. So that made it,
Oh, wow.
more helpful because it's hard to qualify for multifamily when you haven't done one. It's kind of a chicken or the egg, you know, kind of thing. Like you need experience to be able to get the loan, and you need the deal. So yeah, so it worked out.
So how did you get the money to buy the single family homes as rentals?
Man, saved up for my first one back in 2005, and then just kind of, a lot of your listeners might be familiar with like the BRRRR method, which is, buy, renovate, rent it out, refinance, and then repeat it. And so I just started doing that. That first one, it, went up in value enough where I was able to pull a HELOC out of it,
Uh-huh.
a line of credit. And then I used that line of credit to buy my first duplex. And then it just kind of like slowly starts turning from there. So to the point where I started to have a large enough line of credit where I could go out and I could buy properties with cash in a sense with that line of credit. And that's when it really started turning quick, where, I could go out, I could be very aggressive on the price point, buy something with cash, and then do that BRRRR method, pull that money out, pay the line of credit down to zero, and then just do it again and just rinse and repeat. So that's how I build up the single family portfolio.
And so, were you working a day job or like doing odd jobs, or how'd you get the first one
Yeah,
done?
so my story is maybe a little unique. I know maybe some of your guests are more kind of coming out of corporate America. So I went to school for music business, and out of school I was a tour manager for bands, singer songwriters, and I loved my job. I loved traveling, but I kind of knew that when we would start having kids, that I wouldn't want to be on the road. And so I started buying rentals as sort of an exit strategy to get off the road. So, you know, didn't hate my job. I wasn't in that camp, but definitely was in this place where I saw down the road when I would have wanted to have kids, I'd be able to, get off the road and do real estate full time. So it's fun.
So the real estate was your exit plan. What did you do some math in your head and like I gotta have
Yeah.
10 single family homes so I can quit this thing? Or like what was the actual plan to get out of that and replace that income?
That's a great question. So my plan was to have 20 units to be able to get off the road and do real estate full time. So it lined up very nicely when our first child was born. I was right about where I needed to be, and took the plunge.
So did you leave while you still had the single families, or was your transition after you moved into multi?
I did single family for man. I did single family for almost 15 years before I got into multifamily. So it was quite a while. So after I came off the road, I kept doing single family. I started doing flipping houses, wholesaling, got my real estate license. So I did a bunch of things before finally said, hey, let's focus in on one thing, instead of being spread thin, showing people houses, wholesaling, flipping deals, single family. I was doing the whole gamut of real estate. And so had to kind of at some point say, okay, I can't do all of these things well. I got to pick something, go deep. And so about 2019 was when I said, let's go full on into multifamily and commercial properties.
Okay. So you leave the road, you go into your full-time real estate entrepreneur is what we'll call it,
Mm-hmm.
right? Were you doing everything at one point? I call it chief everything officer. Some
Yes.
people are CEOs, but
Oh yeah, big time. I mean, I was at the job sites painting walls at single family. I was refinishing hardwood floors, changing out toilets. I was running to show somebody a house because I was a realtor. I was flipping a deal. I was, all of it, and just hustling. So it was fun, but you start to get to a place where you're like, this isn't sustainable. So, man, that this single family is interesting because you feel like you're moving pretty fast because you're doing a lot of deals. But when you compare it to taking down a multifamily deal, they're not even close. Like multifamily feels sometimes slower because it's really hard to find that first deal, right? It's like mentally challenging to find the first 30 unit, 50 unit, whatever it is. But then once you take it down, it took me like 15 years to buy 50 single family houses. And then in one deal, you're able to take down 32. So yeah, it's just so much more scalable.
wow. Wow. Okay. And so how did you get from chief everything officer? Like who was your first key hire?
First key hire feels more like a partnership, and that would be hiring property management. So partnering up with a third party management company to come on and manage my apartment complexes. So I decided, from day one of multifamily that I was not going to manage it. So that would be my first key hire would be the management company. And, then since then I still have a lot of the single family portfolio, even though I've started to sell it off. So I have somebody here in Nashville that runs my single family. So kind of getting out of the day to day of that. And then also just deciding to stop doing some things, stop being a
Yeah.
realtor, stop wholesaling, stop flipping, just focusing in on the things, that I love to do and where I can scale.
Yeah, I think that's the game. So my first property management company did not work out. Did yours?
Okay. Yeah. What were some of the challenges?
I hired somebody who was used to doing single family to hire
Mm,
multifamily because
mm-hmm.
I was in the tween stage. We were doing a 20 unit.
Yeah.
We also had an 8 unit that we did in the same transaction, but they were used to using full on contractors for all the things. And I mean, you just kind of went down the path. I think my expenses were like 70-80% of my revenue.
Mm-hmm.
It just
Yeah.
wasn't, they weren't set up to do what we needed to do at scale. And
Mm-hmm.
so it became extremely frustrating. I broke the contract. They charged me fees even though they didn't perform at a high level. And it just put a really sour taste in my mouth. And it was funny because I went back to the Real Estate Investment Association that I was a part of. And as the president, I talked to a couple of people about it. And then I realized that the president wasn't using this group for their property management. And they were the only other
Mm-hmm.
people that were doing multifamily in that group. And I was like, oh, well, that would explain a whole lot. And
Yeah.
I didn't put two and two together as a aspiring investor. But you go through the school of hard knocks and you learn a lot of things. And so were you more successful in that? I guess you knew more people because you were actually in the business of being a landlord and so on and so forth.
Yeah. And you start to learn so I've got several multifamily management companies that I work with. So I don't work with just one.
Okay.
And I found that, the type of deal uh, kind of directs what type of management company you're going to work with. Because there's some management companies that really specialize in 100 unit plus size with on-site staffing, both an on-site leasing person and a management or a maintenance person. And then you have other companies that are really more geared towards running the 20, 30, or 40 unit complexes. And those things can be very different. So I work with, 3 or 4 management companies in Middle Tennessee area, depending on size and location of the deal. But that's been really eye opening too, for sure.
Well, you see the different ways that people run their businesses and run your property for that matter, right? So
Yeah,
there's the actual business of the property management, then it's specifically to your project and how they do things differently. And, as owners of the assets, you probably look at them very similarly, but depending on the property manager, it can be a very different experience from day to day and property to property.
absolutely.
So do you have like an asset manager in place or an operating officer, or you're still direct communication with the property management
Yeah,
company?
I'm still very involved. I really enjoy acquisitions. So I
Mhm.
really love hunting down deals, putting deals together. And then I also really love envisioning the transformation of the property. And then sometimes, depending on the deal, I'm very involved with the actual execution of carrying out that renovation vision. So that's where I'm still very involved. Um, Not sure yet if I will, bring somebody on to take on some of that or not. But for now, I'm just really loving trying to
Mhm.
focus in on those few things.
Now, what's really cool about this story, and this isn't the traditional model where somebody builds a business up for 15 or 20 years and then they sell and they get this huge wire and then they're like, what do I got to do with it? Like you're honing the skills of being a wealth manager through the
Mhm.
whole journey, right? You started out with the single family homes, grew that portfolio. Now you exited some of those and then you put down on a 32 unit. as luck would or fate would have it, you get to exit that in about a 12-month cycle. And then you go into two more, and then there's probably more, and then there's probably more, right? At
Right.
the end of the day, though, like you have all these different businesses. And so for in essence, you're actively growing your portfolio as you progress versus like saving it all up until one major liquidity event happens. And
Mhm.
I say that to make it very clear to the listener that there are multiple ways to get to the post exit portfolio, which we call exit 7, which is where you've allocated a tremendous amount of capital that has allowed you to create income through the ownership of assets and not through your blood, sweat, tears, and time, which is what most people trade in order to get compensated on a active income basis. And so I don't know if you want to talk about the 32 unit exit or another one, but what I would like to do is talk about the biggest exit that you've had to date, right? And I'll
Yeah.
call it the pot of gold for all intents and purposes. Um,
Mhm.
let's go back because I think you've got that in your mind now. What was your first exposure to someone selling a business?
Man, I haven't had a lot of exposure to people selling businesses. I think since I've never really been in corporate America, I've never really been around um, that kind of thing. That hasn't been, something I've been much around. I've been mostly in the real estate world where, my buddies are selling houses or complexes, which are kind of small businesses in and of themselves. But yeah, never really been in that world too much, to be honest.
Well, I guess really I'm asking the question in the context of how'd you know that you could sell it?
Mm.
Right. I mean,
Mhm.
I know people think they can sell a house. Got it. Right. You buy a
Yeah,
house, you sell a house. But this is a little more sophisticated and it's a little more complicated.
yeah,
Um, and not doing it right can cost you a whole lot of money.
sure, absolutely. Yeah, it was interesting about that deal is I almost canceled it. So, um, got it under contract and did the inspection report, and it came back so bad. And I went to some mentors, looked at it. They looked at it. They said, "Hey, I don't think you should do this deal." I took it to a management company. They said they wouldn't even manage it because it was so bad. Just to give you like one kind of crazy story, we were doing the inspection and went into one unit, and the tenant was there, and he showed me that the current owner, the seller, they had to cut a section out of the living room floor to repair some ductwork or something. And when they were done, instead of replacing the subfloor, they put the carpet over top of the hole. And then they just had the tenant place the couch over top of that hole so nobody would fall through it. So that was the type of deal I was getting into. And it was very intimidating. And so I went to lunch with the seller because it was direct to seller with full intentions of canceling this deal. And he said, "Well, what if I gave you, money off, concessions to make up for the repairs that were needed?" And I thought to myself, well, I was excited about this deal before I got the inspection report. What would it take to get me back to that point? And we just went through all the things that we had found and assigned numbers to it, and he took that amount off of the purchase price, and I decided to go for it. So it was a little stressful. I might have had a few sleepless nights during that first deal. So I would say, I felt like if I could get those units renovated, that I knew I could cash flow it. I wasn't really looking toward the exit as so much as I was trying to get a really great cash flowing asset. And so uh, rents were like 550 a unit, and I thought I could get them up to 1,000, in which we did accomplish that. And so when you have that kind of like delta on a multifamily deal, there is huge upside. So um, if your listeners kind of understand cap rate, at a 6 cap, every additional dollar in monthly income that you adds $200 in value. So take like 1,000 unit rate, a 10 unit. If you can add $200 in monthly income, and this is kind of simplifying it, I think, a little bit, because you do have management fees you have to take out. But if you have a 10 unit and you add $200 per unit per month, so $2,000 additional income per month, you multiply that by 200. So that adds $400,000 in value to your property. So that's kind of what I was looking at as far as adding value to this property. And my plan was to basically do the BRRRR method on that property. It was to drive up the value, which that's great about multifamily because you can actually force the value. And so I wanted to drive up the value and then do a refi and pull capital out and then go buy another deal. So that was my original plan for the exit, and instead decided to sell it when that buyer came along.
Got it.
Sorry,
Got it.
that was a lot.
No, I think it's perfect, right? Because it shows people the way that you can grow the value of the property with relatively small investment.
Yeah.
And I think that's a pretty big deal, because I know people are trying to figure out how to get the most out of their properties.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So as you were going through the process of exiting, did you have someone help you with it?
So a broker had, what's interesting about multifamily is kind of once you're in the club, you're in this weird little, as you know, because you own multifamily yourself, you're in this very small community. And so brokers actually start calling you, once you've bought a deal, because they see that you're a closer. And so a broker had reached out and said, hey, we'd like to just bring you in and do a presentation and talk about your property. And I told them I had no intentions of selling. And they said, well, let's just meet anyways, which is great to build those relationships. And so came in, talked about the property a little bit. And then a week later, they emailed me this LOI from this buyer that wanted to buy the property. So there was some assistance from a broker on selling that property for sure.
How'd you find them?
The broker?
Yeah.
They reached out to me. So they, I guess, saw on CoStar that this property had traded and tracked down my phone number, and they gave me a call. So, yeah.
So what are a couple of things that went really well for you in the exit?
In that exit, I guess the biggest thing is taking that 1031 money and going and finding 2 more deals to go into out of that deal. And being able to drive up those rents to be able to have the proof of concept. So we renovated 2 units at the complex. Maybe 4. We probably renovated 4, and we're able to prove out, that we could take those rents from $550 to $1,000, and then that, I guess, gave the buyer confidence that they could come out and they could finish out the rest of the units and execute on the plan that we'd started. Yeah.
Was there anything that didn't go so well?
Yeah. Lots of things as far as, lots of surprises in the renovation, finding good subs to do quality work. But, I think the biggest realization from that deal is, while it was a good payout, I wasn't like as excited about it as I thought I would be. So it was interesting. After I sold that deal, I just kind of posted on socials like, hey, what's the most exciting day for you? Is it the day you buy or the day you sell?
Hey guys, as you might know, a very small percentage of the people who actually listen to this podcast are subscribers. So do us a favor, subscribe. In fact, we did some analytics and we found out that only 25% of the people who listen are subscribers. And our goal is to get that to about 75% over the next 3 months. So do us a favor, hit the subscribe button so you get notified when our new episodes drop. We plan to bring immense value to you guys going forward as we continue to improve the content that we create at Dreamcatcher. Your dreams should be real. Let's get back to the show.
And it was about 50-50, you know? And for me, it was definitely the day that I buy is the day I'm excited, you know, like I'm ready to get after it. I'm ready to start renovating, working on this. And the day I sell is kind of like, you know, that's okay, but where's the next one, you know? And not in like a complaining way or anything, you know, I'm happy and blessed to have sold that, but it was definitely eye-opening that like, you know, it wasn't really the money that was motivating me. It was more building something and transforming something,
Mm-hmm.
and also providing, you know, quality and, you know, affordable housing for people. So it was interesting seeing that large of an exit and then not being as excited about it as I thought it would be. So I don't know. That was interesting for me.
So, did you get a check or did you get a wire?
Um, well, I never got either because I did a
1031.
1031, you know. So, you know, you see, obviously, you see the net that you're getting on this deal, but no, it never hits your bank account because this third party is holding it. So, yeah, guess
Is
why.
that, do you think that would have made a difference if it went in your account?
That's a great question. I think for a moment, to see those digits in your bank account, it would have been like, that's pretty cool. But then it would quickly fade for me. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Now, with this said, was this the largest amount of money that was ever yours, even if it didn't go into your account?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yep.
How'd you celebrate?
How did I celebrate? That is a great question. I think my wife and I went out to dinner, but nothing too crazy. I think I was already like, okay, where's the next one? What are we doing? What am I buying? So yeah, I don't even remember. That is a good question. Yeah, I don't think we.
Man, the biggest exit of your career, and you don't even remember how you celebrated.
Yeah, I'm not sure what that really says, but
It was anticlimactic, is what it says. I mean, at the end
yeah.
of the day, right? Like, I think you are disconnected from it, which is really cool, right? A lot of times people will get this money. It's like they hit the lottery, they blow it. You have it wrapped up in the most tax efficient strategy that I think for most people is available to them.
Mhm.
And so you're disconnected from it. And now this is just the asset that's going to send you cash flow
Mhm.
for hopefully the rest of your life. And you talked about little people. So maybe your children will be able to benefit from it as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So have you met or gotten to the place where your passive income exceeds your needs from an active income or expense standpoint?
Yes. Yeah. So met that. Hmm.
So that's financial freedom.
Correct.
Uh, do you did you find that hitting the financial freedom number scratch the itch for you? Like, did you feel like it was you'd arrived at some place and maybe the pressure was off, or you could just put your feet up, or were you still like craving and seeking and searching something after that?
Definitely did not, you know, I definitely did not find I just arrived and I want to go sit on a beach, you know. Definitely did not reach a point where I was like, okay, I'm out for sure. I think what it did do for me is when you're in kind of the grind of like, hey, I need to make this every month, uh, you're less open to opportunity. You know, like when I was in the, I need to do enough deals as a realtor kind of mode, um, you're kind of just like, what do I need to do to make money this month? How many deals do I need to do? And when you reach that financial freedom point where your expenses are covered, I think you start to think bigger. You start to think out of like the day to day of just how do I get by. And so
Mhm.
I think that was what had the biggest impact for me is starting to think, okay, um, what do I really love? What brings me energy? What are the things that drain my energy that I'd like to not have in my life? Um, and that's where it really had the biggest impact. But it was weird reaching that point and not being like, okay, I'm just gonna go relax on a beach. Um, I still just want to get up every day and just build something. So yeah.
And so sometimes I'll hear people say things like, yeah, it didn't scratch the itch. I was looking for something else. I thought I would feel something different than that. Um, a lot of times they'll say that they were looking for meaning or significance or purpose because they solved the money problem. Now, you said build something, and that seems like it's on that path, but I don't want to put words in your mouth. Is that what you're chasing or seeking now, or is it just the fact that there's something that you can work on?
I think it's a lot of having something I can work on. One one thing I am probably a little unique on is I think a lot of real estate investors use real estate as a vehicle, which I definitely do. But I really love just buildings themselves. Like I love taking an old dilapidated commercial building and turning it into an art gallery, something like that. So that's the type of thing that really like gives me a lot of energy. And so I love, I love multifamily, and that was great in renovating those. That can get a little bit vanilla. Um, I think what really kind of excites me is getting more and more into creative multifamily spaces and taking old historic buildings and renovating them. So that gets me excited probably more than anything.
What's your connection to it?
Connection to it.
To the dilapidated buildings and art or whatever creative use you would have for them?
Yeah, I think it's kind of taken, in some ways being an artist with taking old buildings and doing something really cool with them. Um, so I love kind of coming into an old space and saying, hey, what can we do with this and how can we revitalize it?
So breathing life in this stuff, the
Yeah,
creation.
yeah, absolutely.
Huh.
Yeah. So I
I
don't
think a
really
lot of
have like you know, um, a unit count goal or anything like that. I'm more just kind of focusing on, you know, doing deals that excite me, doing deals with people I enjoy spending time with, um, and doing deals that provide housing for people, quality housing, and deals that where I can come in and transform something.
why do you care about the quality housing? There's a lot of folks out there who are just trying to figure out how to get as much as they can out of their real estate.
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, hmm. I think it really matters to me that people enjoy living in the spaces that I provide. And it's been like that from day one. I want people to be happy about, um, the unit they're living in or the house that they're living in. I love going to a complex that I own and seeing kids swimming in the pool and having fun. And that just brings me joy. So yeah, that's a great question. I think that, yeah. just really enjoy providing good housing to people where they can have a quality life.
It sounds like it's the experience. And if we think back to your days on the road, like your responsibility was creating a good experience for the folks that you were entrusted in your care, right? The folks you were
Yeah.
managing.
Hmm.
And I feel like if you're an experience creator, that doesn't ever go away. And it's a different kind of art, right? It's not oil on canvas, it's
Right.
not recording an instrument on a track, but it's helping people. You're curating their life, for lack of a better term. And with the housing in particular, like they spend more time in their home than they do in any other environment. And so
Sure.
for you to be able to influence that through the resource allocation as well as um, the plan to actually operate and revitalize those properties, I think you continue to go down the same vein that you've been going down. Um, and so you said you didn't have a unit count, but as we think about, this post-exit portfolio, or yeah, the post-exit portfolio, are you is there like a certain size where you want to be able to divest it? I know that you mentioned that you do deals in all three ways, right? You do it
Yeah.
personally, you do
Hmm.
joint ventures, and you do syndications. And so is there a goal to have like a specific income from your personal portfolio, or are you thinking about maybe putting all your joint ventures together and rolling them up and sending them to somebody else, or the syndications, are they just kind of one off? Like, there seems to be an overarching strategy or theme, even if you aren't trying to get to a
Yeah.
specific door count number.
Yeah. Yeah. I do have an income goal that I'm trying to hit right now. So I'm focusing in on that. Um, and, that's to provide, I want to have some epic travel with my family. Also have a house that I have in my mind that I wanted to build. So that's in there. We just got done converting a school bus into a motorhome. So we travel around on that and have a blast. Yeah, so I do have an income goal that I'm pursuing, and I have no at this point belief that when I hit that income goal, I'm going to be like, oh, I'm arrived because I've done that, and it doesn't. But I think, having goals kind of inform like, what you need to do right now to hit that. And so for me, it's kind of more like, what person am I becoming and how do I become that person? How do I level up? How do I put more systems in place so I can have more margin in my life? Um, I like what Michael Hyatt calls the double win, winning at work and succeeding at life. And so that's kind of like become a little mantra for me. So, you know, growing a business, building something, but still having more and more margin and space with my family. So those are really my two goals right now.
So this is the first time I've actually heard somebody characterize it that way, creating more margin in your life. And so I hear a lot of people talk about margin as profit margin,
Mhm.
or margin on costs of goods, or whatever the thing is, right? But you said margin in your life. So it sounds like the resource you value the most is time.
Absolutely, by
Okay.
far, big time. Yeah, that's a great way
Now,
to put it.
I know the listeners are probably curious because we talk about development all the time. Are you working with a coach, or like what's shaping you, or who's shaping you, or how are you shaping this development so that you can continue to grow to that next level? Because you've made some pretty big leaps, and you look like a young man for a relatively short amount of time, from best I can tell.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't currently have a coach, although it's something I've definitely explored, and I think there's a lot of value there. So for me, it's a lot of books that I read, podcasts that I listen to, um, meetups that I go to, um, friends I hang out with. But I would say the biggest impact are books. Just
Okay.
reading development books, business books. That's had the biggest impact on me. I spend a lot of time um, planning out my weeks, journaling, um, those types of things to really zone in and focus on, what's the next actionable step to get me closer to my goal. So that's where I spend most of my time as far as personal development.
I find that really fascinating. So are you actually turning the pages in the books or are you listening to them? Because some people will say they're reading books and they're listening.
Yeah, good question. I am turning pages. So I'm big on scribbling notes, and it takes
There
me
it
a
is.
while to read a book because I'm kind of probably reading it twice and I'm writing and taking down notes and really kind of digesting it. So yeah, it takes me a while to get through something.
Got it. And have you always loved reading books? Because as a kid, I did not want to read a book unless I had to.
Yeah, I have always loved reading books, especially you know personal development, business books for sure. So um, probably need to spend a little bit more time reading, some fiction. But yeah, if I could just dive into a personal development book, I love it. Absolutely love it.
Now, let's jump back to the real estate because, like, diving into how you got to this place is interesting. The future, I know some of this is, hey, I need to keep some of these in order to, or a lot of these in order to get to my income number faster.
Hmm.
Are you like stacking up your portfolio companies, which is each piece of property each year and saying, hey, this one isn't doing well, I want it out, or
Yes.
this one's doing really well, I want to keep it? Like, how are you kind of stacking those and comparing those and putting that
Yeah.
piece of the puzzle together?
Yeah, and that's a that's a great question because some of my single family I'm holding on to a little bit longer because of the location. So this is very much in the weeds, but Oracle is moving its headquarters to Nashville, and the majority of my single family portfolio is within 1 mile of Oracle's future headquarters. So I'm holding on to this single family a little longer with a plan to exit at some point when it feels like I'm looking in a crystal ball and it's good timing. I don't know when that'll be. It'll probably be 24, 36 months, maybe 48 months. And then I have some other single family that are sort of outside of that are still in up and coming areas, but they kind of need a major refresh. And so to go in and put in that extra capital, the break even analysis doesn't make sense, right? So some of my single family, I'm starting to say, okay, let's let that one loose. It's kind of it's taken a beating, and for me to bring it back up to a really good level, it would just take capital that wouldn't make sense. So I'm kind of selling them off one by one. Some people take the approach where they're going to just take their whole single family portfolio and just sell it off. And I totally get that, but I'm being a little more just strategic about it as I go.
I like that because, I mean, each of them probably has their own P&L, and
Mm-hmm.
so you can evaluate them in that merit. And
Yeah.
it's funny that you brought up the break even analysis doesn't make sense. It's always interesting to me when I see somebody spend 25 or 30 grand in order to sell the thing for $35,000 more, and just
Mm-hmm.
like,
Mm-hmm.
it
Yep.
wasn't worth the risk and it probably wasn't worth the headache in
Yep.
order to make that. So you probably could have just, or probably should have just sold it for where it was at, or at least
Mm-hmm.
gone under contract and then see if you could make it work within the confines of that agreement.
Yeah.
This
Absolutely.
this has been so good, Brandon. One last question I'd love to slip in here is just the thoughts around the 1031. I
Mm-hmm.
think some people are like, kick the can down the road, just 1031 until you die, never pay the taxes, and whoever inherited gets the stepped up cost basis. And then there are other people who are like, I'd rather pay the taxes now than be
Mm.
trapped in the 1031.
Yeah.
Yeah. Was there, I assume, just based on our conversation, that that was an intentional and deliberate decision, not
Yeah.
something that just kind of happened because somebody mentioned it on in passing. So what led you to take the path that you have when it comes to what you do with the proceeds from your transactions?
Yeah. And I see both sides of that for sure. Um, Especially if future political situations, maybe,
Mhm.
uh, taxes are even higher, so maybe it's, you know, I see it from that perspective. For me, I want that money now so that I can put it to use. My biggest thing is velocity of money, so if I can recycle that money, if I can have it now and I can recycle it a bunch of times, I feel like that's going to have a bigger impact than taking that tax hit now. Um, Even if, sometimes I invest as an LP in other people's deals. So when I take my Roth and my SEP and I use that as my LP money. So I like to see deals where there's a potential for a refi within 24 months to get my capital back, but still be in that deal earning money. So I see it kind of similar to the 1031 with those two things, if that makes sense.
Okay. Now, did you take any money out of retirement or anything else to kind of start building this stuff, or it was all after tax money? Here we go.
Yeah. 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 So I actually did a 1031 into that 32 unit and then a 1031 out of it. So cost basis is getting lower and lower. So definitely wanting to keep doing the 1031 if I can. For
Yeah,
sure.
it can get ugly if you don't. Man,
Yeah. Well, especially if you throw in cost segregation on top of that, and you have that
yeah.
recapture tax. So that's even bigger. So yeah, I wouldn't want to know what my tax hit would be at this point because it's just stacked upon stacked. So yeah.
You have to make sure that you have a great strategy. I think one thing that a lot of people miss is that taxes, once you get to a certain level, are your biggest expense. And
Yeah,
if you don't have a good plan to manage them, it'll just eat up your wealth. And so
absolutely.
I I really appreciate the way that this conversation went today because it opens up people's eyes to a lot of the challenges that come when you start becoming a wealth manager. If you're just relying on your CPA or your financial advisor to guide your strategy, and this isn't something they do, alternative investments is different than long and short term gains in the stock market, although it still has the same tax implications. There's some other things that you can do in order to reduce the amount of money that's owed in taxes with these alternative investments. But you better know what you're doing because if you
Yeah.
don't, you're gonna be writing Uncle Sam a big old check, and that's not ever something that people are really excited about doing. So, Brandon, thank you so much for joining us on the Dreamcatchers podcast. My final question is, who else should we have on the show, man? You came because Chad
Mhm.
thought you'd be a great fit. And we always like to get some recommendations on other folks who can come in and share wisdom with the folks who are working on their exits.
Yeah. So one thing we didn't get to touch on is another company that I have, which is a hard money lending company here in
Oh,
Middle
cool.
Tennessee. So my business partner is Will Coleman, and he's a rock star operator. And I'd love to see him on the podcast. And together we're scaling up a hard money lending company here in Middle Tennessee. So it's been really fun, and yeah, he's super impressive. So he'd be great to have on here.
Well, we're going to dive deep with Will on the science of hard money lending, but that may be a term that's new for the listeners. And so, if you don't
Mm-hmm.
mind, would you explain what that is and why that makes sense? Because
Yeah,
it's powerful if you can actually figure out how to do this
yeah,
without losing your capital, which is not fun.
absolutely. Yeah. So hard money lending is, essentially another term for private lending in a sense. And so sometimes when people are doing a real estate deal, for whatever reason, there's multiple reasons. a traditional loan from a bank just isn't going to make sense. So they're going to go out and seek private money or hard money. And hard money, the term hard money is because it's lending on a hard asset. So it's a loan. We're always first lien position on a piece of real estate. And so when somebody might need to close quickly on the deal, or maybe the deal's just a little outside of the box of what their bank can do, we're going to come in and we're going to loan on it. We're typically very short term. So sometimes we're loaning literally for 24 hours for what's called a transactional deal. And then other times we're loaning for up to about 6 months. So especially right now when lending is a little funky, hard money lending can be a great resource. If you're out there doing flipping, you can reach out to a hard money lender to fund your deals.
Man. Guys, you gotta check it out when Will jumps on the podcast. Brandon, this has been awesome, man. We're talking about real wealth building opportunities, and I'm sure that investing in a multifamily and some of the other cool stuff you've done in real estate has dramatically changed your net worth and been a game changer from the communities that you've been able to impact through your vision and your mission of providing quality housing and experiences to the folks that are owners, or I'm sorry, renters or residents at the properties that you own. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing your experience, man.
Thank you, man. This has been awesome.
All right, to the listeners, your dreams should be real. We'll talk to you on the next episode.